The cries of a little boy echoed softly in a quiet mansion where laughter was rarely heard. His name was Daniel, only 9 years old, and far too young to understand why the world felt so cruel. The mansion he lived in was beautiful on the outside, a tall gates, polished floors, chandeliers that sparkled like stars, but for Daniel, it was nothing less than a prison. His stepmother, Clara, had moved in just a year earlier after his father remarried. To everyone in the outside world, she was charming, always smiling, always well-dressed, speaking sweetly to neighbors and friends. But when the front doors closed and no one was watching, Clara showed a side of herself no one else ever saw. And it was Daniel who bore the brunt of it. Every morning, while other children were woken up with gentle voices, Daniel was shaken awake with harsh words. His breakfast wasn't warm pancakes or fresh juice, it was often the leftovers Clara didn't want. If he complained, she snapped at him. If he stayed quiet, she found fault anyway. "Why are you so slow? Can't you do anything right?" she would hiss. Daniel, small and fragile, would look down at his shoes, fighting the tears that welled in his eyes. He had lost his real mother years ago in an accident. His father, Mr. Henry Parker, was a busy millionaire businessman, traveling frequently, and Daniel was left behind in Clara's hands. To Henry, Clara pretended to be the perfect stepmother, always sending him updates, always smiling in family photos. But behind closed doors, her mask dropped. Daniel's biggest challenge wasn't the chores she gave him, scrubbing the floors, cleaning her shoes, or even skipping meals. It was the loneliness. The feeling of being unloved in his own home. Sometimes, late at night, he would sneak to the window of his bedroom, hugging his teddy bear, one of the last gifts from his late mother, and whisper, "Mom, why did you leave me? Why doesn't Dad see? When will someone save me?" But there was no answer. Just the silence of the night. One rainy evening, Clara's cruelty went too far. Daniel had accidentally spilled a glass of milk while setting the table. Clara's face twisted in rage. "You useless child," she screamed. She grabbed his arm so tightly it left red marks. Then, without mercy, she dragged him toward the basement. "You'll sleep here tonight. Maybe darkness will teach you some manners." Daniel begged, his little voice breaking, "Please, please don't lock me here. I'm sorry. I'll be careful." But the door slammed shut. He sat on the cold basement floor, knees pulled to his chest, tears rolling down his face. For hours, he cried himself to sleep in the dark, the sound of thunder outside his only company. What Clara didn't know was that fate had its own plan. That very night, Henry returned from a business trip earlier than expected. He had wanted to surprise his family with gifts. As he entered the mansion quietly, he noticed something strange. Clara was lounging comfortably in the living room, humming to herself. "Where's Daniel?" Henry asked casually. Clara froze for a second but quickly forced a smile. "Oh, he's asleep early. He was tired from playing all day." But Henry frowned. Something didn't feel right. He decided to check for himself. He walked upstairs to Daniel's room only to find the bed neatly made and empty. Confused, he searched the house until a faint sound reached his ears. It was soft, broken, a child's muffled sob. His heart sank. Following the sound, he opened the basement door. There, huddled in the dark corner, was his little boy. "Daniel!" Henry rushed in, pulling him into his arms. The boy trembled, clutching his father's shirt, too scared to speak at first. Henry's eyes filled with tears as he asked, "What happened? Who did this to you?" And then the truth spilled out. Between sobs, Daniel told him everything, the cruel words, the punishments, the empty meals, the loneliness. Henry's heart broke. Guilt stabbed at him like a knife. How had he been so blind? How had he left his only son in the care of someone who treated him this way? When Henry confronted Clara, her mask finally cracked. "You don't understand," she snapped. "That boy is nothing but a burden. He's weak, spoiled, always in the way. I married you, Henry, not to play nanny to your son." Her words cut deep. For the first time, Henry saw the cold truth behind her pretty smile. Furious, he declared, "Pack your things and leave. Tonight." You will never hurt my son again." Clara tried to protest, but Henry's decision was final. She left the mansion that very night, and for the first time in a long while, the house felt free of darkness. From that day forward, Henry vowed to change. No more endless business trips that left Daniel alone. No more blind trust in people who didn't care for his son. Instead, he became the father Daniel had always needed: present, loving, protective. Mornings were filled with laughter again. Henry cooked breakfast with Daniel, sometimes burning the toast but laughing together anyway. They went to the park, built Lego castles, and talked about Daniel's dreams. Slowly, the sadness in Daniel's eyes began to fade, replaced with a light that had been missing for far too long. The biggest challenge Henry faced wasn't rebuilding his fortune he already had, that it was rebuilding his son's trust. At first, Daniel hesitated. He had been hurt too much to believe things could truly change. Sometimes, he still flinched when someone raised their voice. Sometimes, he woke up from nightmares of the basement. But Henry never gave up. Night after night, he sat by Daniel's bed, telling him stories, reminding him he was loved, that no matter what happened, he would never be alone again. And slowly, Daniel began to believe him. Years later, Daniel grew into a confident, kind-hearted young man. He never forgot the pain he endured, but instead of letting it harden him, he chose to let it teach him compassion. He helped others who felt lonely or forgotten, just as he once had. And Henry, now older but wiser, looked at his son with pride. They had faced darkness together, but love had guided them back into the light.